Welcome to class today. Today we're going to start a brand new unit on tort law. Tort law is also known as criminal law. The two words are interchangeable. So throughout this course, throughout the semester, we have spent quite a bit of time on criminal law. We did a lot of discussions, we did a lot of lessons as they relate to criminal law. We just finished a phenomenal mock trial which was a criminal law case. So we're pretty much wrapping things up with criminal law. And for the next few weeks, we're going to move into tort law and civil law. I do want to give you some reminders as we get ready to start this new unit. I'm asking that you please bring your textbook to class every single day. The second thing that I'm asking is that you take really good notes because we will not have another test, but there will be a quiz on tort law and civil law. And remember, we have not had a lot of quizzes in this course, so you want to do really well on the quiz. So you can do a great job as you guys have already been doing. You guys are doing an excellent job in the course by taking notes, studying, and I'm sure without a doubt that everyone is going to do a really great job on the quiz. So today we're going to start our very first lesson on tort law. The first thing we must talk about, what is tort law? So in criminal law, when there's something done wrong, when something is committed, a wrongdoing is committed, we call that a crime. In civil law, when a wrongdoing is committed, we call that a tort. So a tort is when an individual is wrong in a way that deserves some type of compensation. We also, and again, these words are interchangeable, we also call it a civil wrong. So tort law is sometimes called civil law. Let's just do a quick refresher and go all the way back to the beginning of this great course in unit number 1 and talk a little bit about the plaintiff. So in civil cases, the plaintiff is the person that has been harmed, and that person is seeking to win a judgment. So I'll repeat that one more time, and I think most of us are pretty much familiar with this. But in civil cases, the person that's bringing the case to court is called the plaintiff. That is the person that has been harmed, and they are seeking to win a judgment. The defendant is the person who's accused of doing the wrongdoing. The punishments are quite different in a criminal court of law versus a civil court of law. So, in the civil court of law, there is no jail time that is served. So, if a person is found guilty, if the defendant is found guilty, they do not serve any jail time. But the defendant can be ordered to compensate the plaintiff in one of two ways. The first way could be through monetary damages, where the person has to pay a certain amount of money for the damages that was done to the plaintiff. The second way is what is known as a remedy, and a remedy is simply something must be done or something must be changed to make up for the harm that was done. So I'll just go through those one more time. So remember that in civil law cases, there is no jail time that is served, but the person can be compensated in one of two ways. It could be through monetary compensation, where the judge or the jury orders the defendant to pay a certain dollar amount, or it could be through what is known as a remedy, that something has to change or something must be done differently to make up for the harm that was done. A great question that I think we should also address is, can a crime also be a tort? And the answer is yes. Remember, we watched that very long video on the O.J. Simpson case. So in the criminal court of law, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty for murder. But the Goldman family, the son Ron Goldman, was accused. O.J. Simpson was accused of murdering Ron Goldman. So the Goldman family, they went to the civil court of law and they sued O.J. Simpson for wrongful death. In the civil court of law, he was found guilty, and O.J. Simpson was required to pay some type a monetary compensation for the death of their son. So that's a really good example. Another really good example, I think, that really explains this really well. If a person breaks into a home and they do a lot of damage, they break things apart. The home is damaged really badly. The person can be charged with the crime of breaking and entering, but then also the owners of that home can take that person to civil court and sue them for monetary damages to recoup the loss because of the burglary, or to recoup property that was lost, or to recover monetary damages for all the damage that was done to their home. So those are two really good examples of how a crime can be a tort as well. The next thing we want to talk about is liability, and this is really important. I'm going to ask that you take really good notes on this particular slide. So tort law deals with the question, number one, who should be liable or responsible for the harm caused? So that's the first question that tort law deals with. The second question is, how much should be paid in damages, or what should the remedy be? So tort law is concerned with these two major questions. Who should be liable or responsible for the harm caused? And the second question is, how much should be paid in damages, or what should the remedy be? We also must talk about what is known as the standard of care. And I'm going to ask you to please make sure you know this definition for your quiz. So the law also establishes what is known as the standard of care. And the standard of care simply means it requires us to act with reasonable care towards people and their property. So I'll go over that definition just one more time if you want to jot it down. The standard of care requires us to act with reasonable care towards people and their property. If someone is injured or if someone is harmed, then someone must bear the cost of the harm. A good example of this would be if a person is injured in an accident and they have broken bones, they need to go to the doctor, then someone must pay for their medical bills. Another great example would be a person that may be hospitalized. If a person is hospitalized, that means they miss days of work, they lose compensation from their job, they miss wages, they miss income. Well, someone has to pay for the loss. So tort law is concerned with who is liable or who must pay. The basic requirements of how people within society treat each other, we call that the standard of care. And again, it's back to the premise that we must act reasonably towards each other. Judges and juries decide if someone acted unreasonably causing harm. Sometimes the person can do it on purpose, and many times it's done through just simply through careless acts. Liability, we do need to kind of tackle this question as well. Is someone liable every time a person gets injured? Of course not. Sometimes the victim can be partially to blame, or could simply be just an accident. Torts compensate people for harms that were foreseeable and preventable. So let me just go over that one more time. So every single time that someone is injured, every single time that someone is harmed, it does not mean that that person will get some type of compensation, because many times the victim can be partially to blame, or it could simply have been an accident that was not avoidable. But torts compensate people for harms that were foreseeable and preventable. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do at this point. I'm going to ask you to please grab your textbook and turn to page number 216. And I'm going to ask you to look at problem 18.1. At this point, you can, after I go over the directions, you can pause the video and you can work on this particular problem. So please turn to page 216 in your textbook and let's do problem 18.1. This will be due by the end of class. Attached to this video, I put a document that you can type your answers in on, that you can turn your answers in on Google Classroom before you leave class on today. So here are the instructions. Please read the description of each case. Each case involves an injury. Assume that a civil suit is brought by the injured person. For each case, you have two things to do. Number one, identify the plaintiff and the defendant or defendants. And number two, determine whether the defendant should pay the plaintiff's damages. For each one of these scenarios, please explain your answers in detail. Complete this work and turn it in on Google Classroom. At this point, you can pause the video when you have finished problem 18.1. Please come back and look at the video for two more slides. Welcome back. I'm so happy that you have finished your first assignment as it relates to civil law and tort law. The next thing we need to talk about is how damages are recovered and considerations. 90% of tort cases filed in court are settled outside of the court. That means the two parties, they come together, they compromise, they negotiate, they work together to settle and come to an agreement before it reaches the courtroom. And that's a staggering number. Only 10% of cases actually get tried in court. Remember that once they make it to court, lawyers, they use common law and statutes to convince a judge or jury that the person that they're representing deserves some type of compensation. Now, the standard of proof is very different in a civil case versus a criminal case. In a criminal case, you must prove that the person is guilty without a reasonable doubt. The bar is set extremely high in a criminal case. They must be guilty without a reasonable doubt. That kind of played a role as we went through our mock trial. There cannot be any doubt at all that the person is guilty. So they must be found guilty in a criminal case without a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, is quite different. It's what is known as preponderance of the evidence. So it simply means that 50% of the weight of the evidence must be in the plaintiff's favor. So the bar is much, much lower. So I want to go over that definition just one more time. Again, you will need to know this for your quiz. So preponderance of the evidence means that 50% of the weight of the evidence must be in the plaintiff's favor. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed. This is my very first video for my law class. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Continue to bring your textbooks, take good notes, and we're going to have a great close of this semester. You guys have been a phenomenal class. We'll be back to go over part 2 on tomorrow. Have a great school day.